Hey there, folks. This is Screen Watching. This is the podcast that proves first you get the power, then you get the podcasting. Folks, we're going to be talking about all things on screen. That's the things that we've watched on the screen. And then we're going to talk about them in some sort of podcast form. Simon, I'm not going to dilly-dally. Let's just dive right into the podcast.
It's not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher, mother!
Secret lover.
That's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for it.
Folks, my name is Dan Barrett. I do this podcast with Simon Foster. He's the Simon I was referencing just then. I wasn't calling you, my podcast friend, the name Simon. I know what your name is. Don't worry. I haven't forgotten it. I promise. Anyway, Simon Foster, how are you?
Oh, look, I'm doing okay, Dan Barrett. It's a very early time for a pre-record of the podcast here. I'm struggling with puffy eyes and the sun just coming up as we press record on the podcast and blaring in my face. If you're watching this on YouTube, yes, that's how I look after a ragged night's sleep and an early start to the day. How are you, Dan Barrett?
Look, I'm doing fine. I started my morning at 4:30, as I do every morning with a screeching kid, and then here we go. So, Simon Foster, we talked about the power. There's obviously a power trip that I'm embarking on here to make you get up early to podcast.
Yes, clearly.
Yeah.
Literally, yes.
Yeah. Also, I got an email late yesterday afternoon saying, hey, that solar panel installation we're doing next week, we're now doing that tomorrow morning, right when you're podcasting. That was in the email, which was really, they've done their homework.
Yeah, they certainly have. Queensland power. What is this, the thing that's happening in Queensland at the moment? People are just getting solar panels left, right, and centre. I'm all for, not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's good.
Well, I can tell you this. Basically, you can get yourself a little bit of a rebate on the solar panels.
Yes.
But the panel rebate comes to an end in 2.5 weeks or something like that. So they're signing up all the people they can for that. And then next year, there's a rebate on the battery. So
right,
we're getting the panels up there now.
So people all over Queensland are wrapping their roofs in alfoil and saying, no, that's a solar panel, really.
I mean, they can. I don't know. It's really going to help their battery at all.
Well, that's good. Then we'll have power for a little while. That's excellent. So we should maybe kickstart things.
Yeah, I've got no plans to dilly-dally whatsoever.
Let's not dally-dilly.
It stinks.
Simon Foster, there is a number of, there's one big title on this, but we're not going to go with the big title. Instead, you're launching with Call Jane on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, look, I thought I would. There's actually two really interesting films I'm reviewing this week, and as we've come to expect over the last...
As opposed to usual.
As opposed to usual. Well, as we've come to expect over the last couple of weeks, there's nothing in cinemas. Everything's just clearing a path for Avatar next week. So,
sorry, has that been happening all year?
Yeah, it's kind of happening. Yes, I know your thoughts on the exhibition game at the moment. You're not far wrong, to be honest with you. Just off topic for a second, I had a conversation with the manager of Event George Street, and he was saying, there's no one here. We've got nothing to show anyone. I think that's why all these sort of Netflix movies and some of the Oscar contenders like The Fabelmans and Puss in Boots are getting sort of runs here and there, sort of preview screenings, because there's nothing else to bring people to the movies.
That happens every year around this time of the year, as the streamers all get their Academy Award picks in the cinemas. They run for 3 to 4 days. And
yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Call Jane. This is an Amazon Prime movie, actually made theatrically, but bought by Amazon and sent to the streamer. It tells the story of the Jane Collective. Now, this was a group of women who in the late 60s, early 70s ran a network of free abortion clinics in the US and helped women who were often outlawed from getting terminations because of the state laws and the federal laws in many cases. And until Roe versus Wade came about and changed things, this was a crucial and very secretive sort of underground, I guess you could say, operation that saved upwards of, allowed for at least 12,000 women over the course of the Jane Collective's existence to have abortions. In this movie, we meet Elizabeth Banks, who's a very sort of upmarket suburban woman who becomes pregnant, but has a congenital heart defect and who may die during childbirth if she continues with the pregnancy. In fact, there's a very good chance she will die. So she seeks out the Call Jane Collective when her options to deal with the established medical profession fall on deaf ears. And heading up the Call Jane Collective in her city is the wonderful Sigourney Weaver, who plays Virginia, who's a woman who understands the trauma and the anxiety that women go through when they find themselves in this situation, and who takes it upon herself to run the Call Jane Collective and become friends with the Elizabeth Banks character Joy. And what you have here is a story that certainly doesn't skimp on the details of what these women go through and the hardships of their lives, but also speaks to a real bond and a real unity that they shared in making the Call Jane Collective such an important part of American society at that time, albeit secretive. There was a documentary a few months ago that outlined this as well, that I think I referenced here on the podcast, and it was and it'd make a great double feature to see the true story that happened behind it, and then this surprisingly entertaining. It's quite an upbeat show. Elizabeth Banks is wonderful in the lead role, but to compare the two would be really, really interesting. It's called Call Jane. Be warned, it does have some fairly frank, certainly discussions about what goes on during an abortion, and some scenes that take you right into the room where it's all taken care of. But the actual message of the movie is far more warm and engaging than you might expect. Call Jane is on Amazon Prime.
Now, was that documentary you're referring to, that was called The Janes, which I think in the US
Yes.
is an HBO Max like miniseries of a couple of episodes? Is that possibly right?
That's exactly it. And I think I referenced it in our what else have you been watching segment a couple of months back. Yeah, it was a terrific documentary as well. And I find this a really moving and really sort of powerful story, which is all captured in this film.
Yeah, I don't know if that got a release here or not, but you can certainly find it if you're dedicated to such things.
Yeah, for sure. It's great seeing Sigourney Weaver on screen. Her and Elizabeth Banks together in this have just a terrific chemistry. And I was really surprised by Elizabeth Banks. She's wonderful in this part. I've only really seen her in comedic bits, but she's terrific in this. I also should mention that the film, let me just reference very quickly. This week I saw a major Oscar contender. I won't give it away because we're under embargo and I don't want to say anything just yet, but it was so badly overlit on the cinema screen that I saw it on. It was like all yellows, and you could hardly make out any detail. Then I watched Call Jane, and it looked like a film shot in the 70s. All the shadows were really dark. It looked like it was shot on film. And I just so appreciated how beautiful this movie looked, despite it just being, it didn't have any sort of great affectations to be a cinematic masterpiece visually, but it just looked really, really beautiful with the colors and the dark grains. And so, that surprised me as well about it.
Okay, Simon, let's change tack a little bit. I'm going to talk about a documentary. That's right. You look like you got a lot of sun in your face right now. Are you staring?
I'm literally staring at the morning sun. Usually this blind shot. While you're talking, if I duck off for a second and come back in shadow, you know what I've been doing.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm just seeing that you're staring straight into the sun. Like, I suspect that you're chewing a few activated almonds. It's a big morning for you. But Simon, let's not talk about that. I'm going to talk about a new Disney Plus documentary. It's called God Forbid. Now, God forbid, if you are a religious fellow like my pal Simon here.
No, please. I'm seeing the light. I'm seeing the light right now.
You may be familiar with Jerry Falwell Jr. Now, he's one of these guys. Jerry Falwell was one of the major evangelist Christian types. We see them here in Australia from US stuff with these big mega churches. And like, I don't think Australia's as strange as the mega church these days, either, with the rise of Hillsong. But essentially, the Falwells were a family of considerable power in the US, where because I guess people in the US are God-fearing types. Evangelists like your Falwell, Jerry Falwell, and later his son Jerry Falwell Jr. The two of them were really able to monopolize a sense of political power, because who they deemed to be ethically sound and of good Christian values was generally sort of it was a good thing to have in your pocket if you're running for, say, president, for example. And while that was certainly the case with Falwell Sr., that's continued on with Falwell Jr. until there was a certain event that took place, a revelation of sorts that really stripped Jerry Falwell Jr. of all of his power. And that's what this documentary is about. So, God forbid, it is told through the viewpoint of a young kid named Giancarlo. He's now in his late 20s, or maybe early 30s, late 20s, I'm going to say. But the story really begins with him as a 20-year-old pool boy working at a resort in Miami. He gets approached by a lady at the pool, and she's like, hey, hey, hot stuff. That's my phrasing. I don't know. That's really it. Basically, interested in what you've got to offer. Come along, spend the evening with my husband and I. And the idea would be that he rocks up to a hotel room. The husband doesn't get involved as much as just sort of watches from afar. And then, he gets to have his way with this attractive older lady. Anyway, he's a 20-year-old young man, and he's like, yeah, I'm up for that. That sounds like something I'd be into. So anyway, goes and does that. As the story's being retold, it doesn't shy away from the fact that, he was kind of just up for it. But at the same time, they add a lot of weight into it as though, it's a big decision he was making that night, as opposed to what it really was, which is just a, awkward booty call. But anyway, what he ends up learning is that the people that he is turning up to, the aforementioned husband is Jerry Falwell Jr., and it was to be his wife there, Becky Falwell. And so for 7 years, they kept this relationship going where Becky was really into having sex with young Giancarlo, and Jerry Falwell was more than happy to facilitate this. And as they explained in the documentary, basically it was kind of like foreplay for them. So Giancarlo would have his way, and then afterward, Jerry Falwell would come in, they'd, I guess, slap hands, and, he'd get into the ring.
Jeez.
Is this too early in the morning for this, Simon?
I don't know if they use "get into the ring" as part of the discussion in the documentary,
Yeah.
but yes,
Okay.
you're selling it in your terms. So that's fine with me.
Yeah. So anyway, what the whole documentary is really about is what happens to this pool boy, especially when eventually news starts getting out that there's a pool boy involved. And what that does, it really flips this interesting sort of gender dynamic where for years and years, we'll sort of talk about your, oh gosh, what's her name? Monica Lewinsky's of the world, and how they've been kind of used and abused by people in power. And it's like these sort of faceless women that don't really have agency of their own once they've been outed as being part of these larger stories. Instead, they just kind of become tabloid jokes. But they really sort of point out, well, they don't actively say it out loud, but I think it's insinuated kind of nicely, that the same thing happens to men when they're involved in these situations as well. It's really not so much a gender thing as much as a power imbalance, just generally. Yeah. And what I thought was really canny about this was they end up showing a clip of Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. Samantha Bee, who's someone who goes out there with progressive bona fides, Simon. She's very much out there as though, she kind of gets what it is, but she's just as guilty as the rest of them, making jokes about the pool boy, which I thought was a very subtle bit of media commentary as they were running through the scandal that really sort of ruined this young kid's life.
You make a good point, and the key aspect of the story is when they start to bring large amounts of money into the relationship and take him on as a business partner, and that gives them, he's literally handcuffed to them.
It's about
through
power.
The business arrangement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's about money and power.
Ultimately, what they do to keep him sort of, because he's a 20-year-old kid, so at a certain point, he wants to get into a relationship with people of his own age. And so he sort of starts embarking on a relationship like that. That upsets Becky, the wife, Becky Falwell. And so they end up coming up with this real estate deal because he was a Trump enthusiast, this young kid, and was, very much wanting to get into the Miami property scene. Yeah. So they end up sort of funding him buying this apartment complex. Sorry, it wasn't an apartment complex. It was backpackers hostel.
The Miami hostel.
Yeah. So anyway, they get involved in this, but then some shady business partners that the kid ends up bringing into it all. Effectively, they end up finding out what's going on in terms of the relationship with the Falwells, and there's some blackmail involved, and eventually the news ends up getting public. And so what happens for this kid, and this is, 7 years into the relationship at this point, is that, he's been going to university, he's, trying to get a career and a life up and running. But when this news comes out, basically finds himself, it's impossible for him to find employment because his name's out there. As soon as he tries getting a job or even an internship somewhere, they start doing some Googling and suddenly see his history. And he says it, just frankly, is like, look, if I'm out there in the job market and there's someone with the same skill level as I have, why would they hire me with all the baggage I had versus hiring the other person? Totally fair and reasonable, but at the same time, that doesn't help him actually start a career. So he's really sort of stuck with this. But where the documentary maybe takes on a bit of additional weight is that, as I said, the Falwell family were very much about being kingmakers. They were able to really anoint political leaders, particularly from the Republican conservative sort of side of politics. if you wanted to become president of the United States, you had to kiss the ring. And so it's very much about the rise of Trump and how Trump sort of got intermingled amongst it. Now, I'd say this is where the documentary actually falls apart a little bit. While there was definitely the involvement of Trump there, it felt like the documentary just leaned way too heavily into that to give it the weight that I don't think the documentary necessarily needed. I think it's an interesting enough story, but a story that maybe only has maybe a 45, 50-minute runtime, but it's making it into a feature that very much lends into the Trump route to try to give it like the Trumpiness that, I sort of feel that a lot of cultural discourse needs these days to, drive the viewers. But I don't think the documentary needed it. And it's at that point that I think the documentary starts to waver a bit and became far less interesting.
It's that style of documentary that's very common on the streaming platforms at the moment. As soon as the very first shot is an empty chair that the subject walks and sits into, that's been done many, many times over. And it literally just is talking heads, him, his sister. I think that's kind of all. There's not a whole lot of.
Oh no, there's like 3 or 4 other people. I didn't quite catch who they were though.
Yeah. So, but it's got that look and that feel, and then a lot of stock footage, news footage, of course, and it's done with I found the music a bit disconcerting, the backbeat that happens with it, but it's got that look and feel of a streaming documentary that it's not meant to be a work of art. It's meant to sort of present this vaguely sort of tabloidy but also kind of disturbing story, and it does so in a way that does feel very Miami as well. It looks and feels. My wife kept saying, "Oh, look at the beautiful water," and I'm like, "Would you shut up about the water, please?" But yeah, so we're halfway into it. I started to nod off at about the hour mark, so we're going to finish watching it today. But I was engaged. I thought it was an entertaining story that I remember in full. Like I remember all this happening in Four Walls.
It was only a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the fall from grace. Well, that doesn't. I've forgotten things from this morning. So, so yeah, I quite enjoyed the documentary.
Yeah, so we end up watching it in 2 halves. We watched like the first, I think we literally split it right in the middle unintentionally. But yeah, I certainly found that second half, which delved a lot into the Trump connections. That's where it just sort of lost, I wouldn't say it lost relevancy because that's obviously a core part of the story, but it just didn't really feel that really was the main thrust of the story, because until then it's told very much through the perspective of Giancarlo. But as soon as Trump comes into it, suddenly the story becomes bigger, and it's harder for Giancarlo to really have the insights because the story's kind of evolved beyond him at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you kind of have to pick your lane a little bit, and the documentary sort of wavers at that point. But look, I think it's probably worth your time. It's, even if you watch the first half and just sort of turn it off when you start getting a bit bored with it, you'll certainly hear an interesting story, and one that, it'll come back in your life at some point and be like, oh yeah, that's that Giancarlo kid.
With
but
everything,
just a bit of trivia.
With everything that's been exposed over the last few years under the Trump regime, it shows what a Caligula's court, that high echelon of money and power, is in America at the moment. That just with Epstein and Trump and all this going on, it's such a immoral and vile sort of collection of wealth and bad decision making.
Well, that's the thing. We're entering a period where constant sort of media attention and internet access and the freedom for people to come to the internet themselves and be able to talk, and really. Back in the day, you had gatekeepers who would be more or less sort of determining how much weight a news story had. And so that's how things like the Harvey Weinstein story can become just a bit of an industry joke that everyone knows about, but no one really takes that seriously. But it's when the power is sort of in the hands of people who actually genuinely care about this and keep on driving it forward as going, this is something we're actually concerned about. That's how things maintain the sort of media momentum that we're seeing the last couple of years. So what we're doing is just exposing these dark corners in a way that I just don't think they're really being exposed, because essentially journalists and other people of whom had sort of entry into this were kind of compromised themselves. So it's
true.
Yeah. And this isn't like an anti-journalist screed at all. This just kind of, these are systems in place, and, the systems are changing at the moment. It's fascinating. And documentaries like this are kind of the result of that.
Yeah, very good. It's called Call Jane. It's on.
And that's not called Jane. No,
that's on.
We talked about God Forbid, which is now streaming on Disney Plus in Australia or Hulu in the US.
You're going to get me up at this time of the morning to a podcast. I'm going to make some big errors. So settle in, everybody. It's going to be one of those podcasts.
And can I just give a little bit of trivia?
Yes,
the
please.
guy that directed this, his name is Billy Corbin. People may know him as the director of the 2006 doco Cocaine Cowboys, which was one of his biggest ones. Yeah, but he started out as a kid actor. Okay, he appeared in things like Parenthood and Empty Nest, but I know him as the star of Archie's Riverdale and Back Again, which was a made-for-TV pilot for Fox, as I recall. Okay, and it had people like what's her name? That lady from Picket Fences that I can't think of the name of. I was going to call her Lauren Graham, but it's not Lauren Graham. It's
the other one,
yeah,
the one who walks
yeah,
and talks and wears a dress. What's her name? I can't
yeah.
remember now.
She was also the star of the movie Turbulence.
Oh,
Holly.
Lauren Holly.
Lauren Holly, that's
Okay.
it. Yeah. Sorry, she started in that. But anyway, there was the thing with the Riverdale gang getting back together for a high school reunion, and they've all got kids now, and it's about, the crazy shenanigans that happen. That pilot didn't go anywhere.
Okay.
But this guy, he played Jughead's son, whose name was Jordan Jughead Jr. Jones.
Nice. Billy, well, see, my wife watched it and oh my God, she thought that it was the lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins. And I was like, no, that's not. That's the other guy, Corgan, isn't it? Isn't that Billy
Yeah,
Corgan?
Billy Corgan.
Okay,
yeah.
So she was completely confused. All right. So that wasn't called Jane. That was, God forbid, and it's on the Disney Plus platform. Now we switch over to Apple TV for one of the most anticipated films of this viewing season. It's the Will Smith movie Emancipation. Clearly the big shadow hanging over this film, and unfortunately it has to be so, is can it drag Will Smith out from under the shadow of The Slap? I think
so what was this about?
The what? Emancipation?
The slap. Like, sorry, what happened?
Oh, you did. You switched off earlier in the year. Oh, okay, yes, no. When he landed one on the cheek of Chris Rock during a certain award ceremony earlier this year, when Chris Rock did a joke about G.I. Jane 2 to his alopecia suffering wife. But
how did I miss this? This sounds like big news.
It was in the back of the paper somewhere for a couple of days.
Sorry.
So, Emancipation is a very Oscar-worthy story. It tells the story of someone who became known as Whipped Peter. Now, he took on that name because of a famous photograph that was taken of him when he finally arrived in Baton Rouge at the end of a long journey from a Louisiana slave site. He broke free from that slave site, ran into the swamps, and spent this a huge odyssey getting to the Baton Rouge location where Lincoln's troops were slowly freeing the slaves from plantations right across the South. The photo shows horrible scarring on his back, and he became sort of the image that was used for decades to show the horrors of slavery, and the photo traveled all around the world. And the true story behind that makes for a very gripping and certainly very visually striking film in Emancipation. It's directed by Antoine Fuqua, who we know as kind of a bit of a studio lackey. He makes very stylized genre films. His last couple have been the Equalizer films with Denzel Washington. You can go all the way back to things like, I think he did Gone in 60 Seconds, and he's done a lot of action films along the way and does them very well. And this movie really is a tug of war between a director who has matured and wants to make an important film and get Oscar attention, and a genre hack who wants to film exciting action scenes and will have his camera whirring around everywhere to bring some momentum to this story. The slave story is one that is obviously horribly tragic and a blight on humanity. It has been told on key occasions in the history of cinema to very powerful effect. Most recently, 12 Years a Slave, I guess you could say, was that one. This one very much sticks to that template in that it's a horrific account of one man's suffering and desire to get back to his family and find meaning in his life beyond the cruelty and the harsh life he lives as a slave. And it kind of works in Will Smith's performance, which is superb. And at times it looks like he's absolutely etched in, not granite, because that implies strength, but almost like igneous rock. Like his face is almost crumbling as he goes through this hardship. But then he's asked to do some kind of naff action movie things. There's a scene where he fights with an alligator, and I'm like, really? Come on, that's just pulling the movie right out of the important sort of area it should be in. In the end, it's eminently watchable, quite grueling in parts. Ben Foster is a standout as the role played by Michael Fassbender in 12 Years a Slave, and Leonardo DiCaprio in Django Unchained, that cruel overseer of the slaves. But is it going to sort of win over the Oscars and maybe get Will Smith another nomination? Yes, to one of those. I think Will Smith ought to get a nomination and should, but I don't think the film is as important as it should be or wants to be in this award season, which is looking to be fairly banked in with some really good films. So it's on Apple Plus.
Now, okay, so a few things with this. One,
Yes.
the slap, do you think that's going to be enough? So if you're going to balance out the strength of performance of this by Will Smith versus the controversy surrounding that slap, how do you feel he's going to fare with the Academy Awards? Because my assumption is that people are going to look at it saying, you know what, we're willing to nominate him, but we're not willing to give him the award. Would that be correct? Or
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I think it's a performance of such intensity and strength that any other year it wouldn't even be there wouldn't be any controversy about it. It would be one of the 5 nominated this year. That's just a go-to.
You don't think he's a guaranteed winner though?
I'm almost certain he's not a guaranteed winner. I honestly don't believe that the guilds that vote for the Best Actor award and the Hollywood types who will have to bestow upon Will Smith a degree of forgiveness for last year to give him the award. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel as though people's memories are pretty short term.
You know, the other thing is, if the film was ostensibly better, I think if the film, because there's going to be
what I was after.
I think
I was prodding a bit to get to this.
I think if the film was just a walk-up start to nominations and people saw it and went, well, we can't ignore it. It's going to get like 8 or 9 nominations. We can't ignore the fact. And you know, I can see it getting some technical awards. It's shot with this sort of desaturated color tone, which is almost black and white. And he uses splashes of color the way that Spielberg used the girl in the red dress in Schindler's List. So there's some sort of film language there in the use of color in an otherwise completely sort of desaturated film that looks like the whole film looks like it's covered in ash. So I think it'll get some technical awards. I certainly don't think it's a lock on any of the main categories. If it was, there would just be this groundswell of support for it that might sort of sweep Will Smith's any bad feeling about Will Smith out of the way and give him the award. But I think they'll honor him and say, yeah, you can still make good movies, but you're still kind of a dick. So let's move on to your next film and see if we're ready to honor you then.
Yeah, Emancipation, I'm keen to check out, but also the fact that it's another slave drama, I'm just not sure I'm like up for that entirely.
I'm very careful how I say that, and I didn't want to call it the slave genre because it is a subgenre.
But like it is a genre of film though. Like it's,
I know it is, and as powerful as they are, they do and they should tell the same story, and they should tell or artistic variations on the same story. But Emancipation, unfortunately, I have to say, it seems a little familiar to me, and I kind of knew when it was going. Plus, at 2 hours, the whole midsection of the film, or more than the midsection of the film, is literally a chase drama. Ben Foster on horseback chasing Will Smith through the swamps.
Now we're talking. Now I'm excited.
And Ben Foster is great in the part, and he's got these 3 dogs, which are just, there's one scene where he's holding onto the dog's chain while he's literally just barking at Will Smith's face as he's bound, to the thing. And it's in moments like that where you see the strength of Will Smith's performance. The rest of the film, not so much.
Yeah. The other thing that has me a bit curious is Charmaine Bingwa's in this one. She had been in a good fight, and I've interviewed her a couple of times. Yeah. And I really like her. I think she's a great screen presence, but also from having spoken to her like in real life a few times, like I just like her. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious about seeing how she comes in this, because this is a good sort of breakout opportunity for her. So does she land like particularly well in a film?
She's not. I read some early buzz that she was also an awards contender. She's terrific in the very few scenes that she has.
Yeah, she's not in a lot, is she?
No, she's not in a lot.
Yeah,
she
that's the feeling I got.
Yeah, she has one key scene to camera that you can almost see as the Oscar clip. But there's big chunks in the film where she's not in.
Yeah, I think there's the opportunity for people to get supporting award nominations for only being in a couple of scenes.
Oh,
But
of
I think
course, yeah.
generally you need to be a actor of a certain amount of recognizability to be able to like get that nomination.
The
But I'm
whole
not sure
world,
she's there by any means.
Hollywood was rocked when back in the 70s, an actress called Beatrice Straight won the supporting actress Oscar for Network for literally one scene. She played the wife of
Oh,
Howard Beale, I think. She played the wife of Peter Finch and had one scene. I may be wrong as to the character she played, but she went on to be the paranormal psychologist in Poltergeist and did a lot of work through the years. But yeah, she literally had one scene in the middle of Network that earned her the Oscar. So it happens.
well, good on her. Oh, Charmaine, good luck to you. Hey, let's move on to the next film we're going to discuss, which is well, it's not a film, it's a TV series. It's a scripted drama called A Spy Among Friends. Now, Simon, when I was looking at this a couple of days ago, I thought to myself, you know what? We've got a British drama, a spy drama, it's in the title, okay, starring Guy Pearce and Damian Lewis. And I thought to myself, how have these two not been paired up together? Like, it just kind of feels like it should have happened by now, doesn't it?
Yeah, good cast.
Yeah. Two strong leads. The premise of this one, and it's based on a real life story, real life series of spies. Basically, you've got a spy played by Damian Lewis named Nicholas Elliott. He works for MI6. He's an intelligence officer, and his world's rocked somewhat when he finds out that a very good friend that he's been working with for years, Kim Philby, real life spy,
Yes.
played by Guy Pearce. He's been working as a double agent for the KGB, and he's defected to the Soviet Union, supposedly. So anyway, he's been sent to try to find out exactly sort of what's true about it all. And when he goes in and sort of meets him, one of the very first things he says is, what's the actual line? I forget what he says, but it's basically something which allows him to more or less sort of establish his bona fides in case the Americans are listening. So what this drama series is really about is the spy activity of the UK, the possible double agent that's been working for the Kremlin, but then also how that's sort of overlaid with their sort of responsibilities, but also, I guess, sort of professional courtesies to the US spies that they also, obviously, what benefits the US spy network versus what benefits the UK spies are actually two different things. So there's always a bit of tension and animosity between any sort of policing units because of that kind of thing. And so this kind of sits like in a fine point in between it all. What you're going to find in this drama is a lot of conversations about being spies. It's lots of people in rooms talking to each other. It's some very dapper looking costuming. It's some very nice establishing shots of London from the early 60s from the outside. Strong performances all the way through. But we've kind of seen this before in a number of different dramas.
I was about to say exactly the same thing. As you just spoke of that, then I thought, this sounds like something I've seen before and really liked.
It's very typical. If you like the genre, don't run, don't walk. This is going to be very much in your wheelhouse. But if you're after something that really sort of pushes the genre and takes things into an interesting, unique direction that you've never really seen before, this is absolutely not the series you should be looking for. Okay. But again, I stress, if you do like this genre, I think that you're going to get a lot out of this. The performances are incredibly tight. The cinematography is really gorgeous. I really like the stylistic look of this. It's lush without looking overly lush. There's certainly a sense of coldness and distance in a way you kind of want from a spy drama. But at the same time, it's such a just visually rich looking show.
If you've got James Bond at one end of the spy spectrum and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy at the other end, which way does this lean?
Yeah, look, this is very much in the Lakari sort of end of lots of conversations about spycraft rather than, people jumping over cars and things exploding around the place. There is an explosion in that first episode. Okay.
Good.
Yeah. But also it's not like it's an epic explosion by any means. It's very much on a premium looking TV show that's definitely made on a budget.
They do the budget. They do the old Axel Foley thing where they put a banana in the tailpipe.
Yeah, there's a bit of that going on. No, that's just being ridiculous now, Simon. So I think what's probably worth noting, this is a new drama series that's been commissioned for ITVX. Now, ITVX is a new network that's launched in the UK. So it's basically ITV, the TV broadcaster. They've got a couple of channels. I think they've got ITV, ITV2, maybe a 3 and a 4 maybe as well. But basically, they've looked at the current market and thought, look, if we want to be able to survive in the years to come, we need some sort of Netflix equivalent. So they've launched this new streaming initiative where they've spent an obscene amount of money to commission a whole bunch of these premium drama shows. So over the next like month or two, you're going to start seeing a lot of these really sort of fancy looking UK productions with some pretty big names in them. And it's all coming from ITVX. So this is part of the series of launch titles for it. And it should probably get a bit of attention. I think that, as I said, if you're into the spy genre, you like Guy Pearce, you like Damian Lewis, and both have quite a lot of fans out there.
Yeah.
You're not going to do poorly with this one.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Where can we find it?
So in Australia, we get it here on BritBox, and in the UK on, as I said, ITVX, which is a ad-supported platform unless you want to pay for it for whatever reason.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Simon Foster, I think we've moved into what we call the middle part of the show.
The middle bit, as it's known. Sting me. How do you want to handle this, my friend? Do we go with the middle bit we thought of through the week, or we go to the middle bit we thought of 10 minutes ago?
Oh, sorry, I don't know as we thought up a middle bit during the week. I thought we were playing an interview, which we're going to push next week.
We're going to do next week, but this week we lost the very wonderful.
Oh, sorry.
Kirstie Alley.
I forgot we were doing that as a middle bit. It's been a very long week, Simon.
Which way do you want to run with this? You want to go with
let's do Kirstie Alley.
Yeah, I think that'd be lovely.
Yeah, sure.
She was a certainly her last years were shrouded in a kind of controversy that came about for some of her political commentary that maybe she and certainly a lot of her fans regret. But there's no denying that back in the day, she was an extraordinary comedic talent, and one whose timing I put up in a post during the week that her timing and very unique delivery sort of made her maybe the comedic actress of her generation, and I stand by that. I thought she was a wonderfully talented comedian. Unfortunately, had to lift a lot of material that probably wasn't as great. And I'm talking from a film perspective here. I know her TV work you'll probably address in a minute, but from the Look Who's Talking films, from the films like Sibling Rivalry, I know that you will certainly wax lyrical about Summer School. She made a lot of films that were maybe subpar in critical terms, but were enlivened by extraordinary Kirstie Alley timing and delivery. So, I remember her very fondly.
Yeah, so the passing of Kirstie Alley, it's certainly, she's got a bit of a mixed legacy about her. So you refer to her sort of political leanings, but it's not really just being political as much as she was a very open Scientologist. Within the Church of Scientology, she was a bit of a head kicker as well, apparently. Got brought in to, bring a number of Hollywood actors into line. There's certainly the ickiness around the Scientology aspect, but then you couple into that she was a very loud and vocal conservative supporter, big Trump person. And look, to my mind, just because you're a conservative person doesn't necessarily make you a bad person by any means. I certainly don't believe that at all. But at the same time, essentially you sort of pick your battles in terms of what's right and wrong, and some of the things that she was really out there, shouting about was certainly not to my taste.
Yeah, she weighed in on the Trump debate and said she was going to vote for Trump because he's not a politician, and sort of got caught up in that early wave of Trumpy thing. She did point out that she voted for Obama for both of his terms, so she was a swing voter, I guess you could say. But it certainly didn't place her in good industry stead by saying she was red aligned.
Yeah, no, exactly. So you've got that going on, but then also when I think about Kirstie Alley performer, I think about her very much tied to the 1980s. She was certainly a presence through the 90s and early 2000s. But to me, when I think about Kirstie Alley, I think about the woman in the very high shoulder pads. I think about the big 80s hair. She was very much of that era and was in full control of her abilities as a performer during that time period. I think from the 90s onwards, it became more about coasting on fame than it was about, the actual strength of talent that she was. And if you think about her career, she starts, look, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily super across her career, so it's not like I'm going deep into the filmography here, but very well known for being Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, playing Lieutenant Savick, which was the Vulcan that was, pure Vulcan in Wrath of Khan, the best of the Star Trek movies.
True.
And she's great in it. She's not a, lead character by any means. She's very much supporting, but very memorable role in that. Obviously from Cheers, she had the... we'll say it's a fairly unpleasant task of coming into what was probably the most successful sitcom of the time that wasn't The Cosby Show. Okay,
It-
I'm not sure which one was the highest rating at the time, but Cheers was definitely one of the top 2 or 3 sitcoms of the era.
I
Certainly
do-
culturally.
I agree, and I do just want to. I gave this a lot of thought through the week, which was a nice change for this podcast. The casting of her on the back of Shelley Long. Shelley Long was a certain type, and in
Oh,
change.
well, just on that. Let me just finish out my sort of thoughts quickly before we go a bit further. So for people who aren't really across Cheers, basically Shelley Long had been in it for 5 seasons. The show was very much a two-hander. I mean, it was an ensemble show, okay, but very much at the core of it, you've got the Sam and Diane relationship. Diane being played by Shelley Long. Shelley Long's like, you know what? I've had enough of the show. I'm perfectly happy to move on. And so to go for a show which is at the absolute top of the ratings heap, culturally, it was one of the most popular shows happening in the United States. And then I had to replace her. And she was a very specific type of a character and a specific type of performer. And so they don't do the thing that you find on a lot of shows where they just bring in someone who's exactly the same. And keep in mind, Cheers had done this itself. After, I think, season 3, you had the passing of oh gosh, I can't think of his name now.
The elderly bartender. They had to.
I'm trying to think of the actor's name. Cantiliano. Oh gosh, usually I could do this. It is early in the morning. But basically, the character of Coach, they end up replacing him and bringing Woody Harrelson playing more or less the same type of a character, just a younger sort of take on him. And they could have done that with Cheers and brought in someone who was very similar to a Diane Chambers type. But instead, they go opposite that and introduce someone who's got absolutely no sexual interest in Sam whatsoever. Yeah. And it's very much about this sort of empowering balance that takes place in the bar from that point in. And Kirstie Alley comes in, and from that first episode, she just sort of slides into the show. It's almost as though she'd been there all along because she's got such a strength of performance coming through there.
It's great you point. That's exactly what I was about to say. The minute she walked into that bar, you knew that there was going to be sexual tension there, and that this woman was so far out of Sam's league that it almost flicked a reset switch on the energy and the sort of sexual undercurrent of the series. He was going to have to be full Sam Malone if he was going to win this over. So it re-energized the show. It's one of the great bits of sitcom casting, I think, and then she delivered on this amazing sort of character that they wrote for her, and turned out to be every bit as good. Some might say better than the Shelley Long years.
I mean, those people are wrong, but sure.
And it's where I first met her, and it's and certainly, well, I mean, I'd seen her in Star Trek 2, of course, and I remember very fondly the North and South TV series that she did with Patrick Swayze. That was a kind of a big deal back in the era of the big network miniseries. So but the Cheers years were extraordinary.
Yeah. So she actually does more time on Cheers than Shelley Long ever did. So she does 6 seasons of Cheers versus 5 for Shelley Long. It was a really long running show. 11 series is pretty long for a sitcom. The quality of Cheers definitely, I think it's still a strong sitcom, but it's certainly not what the show was by the time it starts reaching the end of that 11 years. It's probably worth noting.
For sure.
Obviously, we mentioned Summer School a little while ago. This is a bit of a classic VHS favorite of mine from growing up. Basically, she played almost the same sort of a role that she plays in Cheers, which is very much a standoffish person who doesn't necessarily want to get involved in the shenanigans of your main anti-authority comedic lead, but sort of gets won over by his charms at a certain point. And
she had trouble, and I mean, no one can tell her about the troubles of transitioning from sitcom fame to movie fame. Shelley Long was front and center of that. She became a bit of an industry joke, but she had trouble finding a really strong vehicle. She did some support parts in Summer School and in Shoot to Kill, which is a great sort of wilderness thriller. It was called Deadly Pursuit here in Australia. So if you get
you remember that one,
but it took a few years, and 1989, when Look Who's Talking comes around, a movie which was terribly lambasted by critics, and
deservedly so.
No. See, I think the first one shines under her. Sequels are terrible, that she can't do anything to save those. But I think that first Look Who's Talking finds a comedic beat and finds charm in the performances of John Travolta and Kirstie Alley that probably lifts it above. I remember at the time thinking, why is everybody hating this movie so much? I'm kind of cool with this. So sequels not so much, but then she sort of fell into a run of movies where she had trouble finding that on-screen character. Madhouse with John Larroquette, Sibling Rivalry, and then she sort of worked back into the TV series world as it was back then. So,
Yeah. Veronica's Closet being the most notable TV.
Well, she
show from
certainly
that
had
90s period.
success, didn't she? I mean,
Yeah.
Veronica's Closet was a hit, but even sort of the not demeaning, but self-referential fat actress was a hit back in the day. So
I mean, worth noting with Veronica's Closet, big success, but that was largely because it was scheduled right after Friends.
yes.
When it was sent out to survive on its own, didn't really do so well. So it was a 3-season run, but yeah, certainly culturally notable. Simon Foster, shall we move on?
Let's move.
Okay, I've got some solar installers just minutes away at this point, so let's buzz through this. Simon, you've been watching a few other things. Do you want to note anything here at all?
Yeah, look, I had a chance to see the opening night of Monster Fest this week. The film Christmas Bloody Christmas is an absolute romp. It's one of those Psycho Santa films. It's gone straight to Shudder. It premiered at the festival on Thursday. I think is available on Shudder right now. Shudder, the streaming platform that all us horror fans know about. Directed by a guy called Joe Bedjoss, who does some pretty wild films, and this one is wild in the extremes. Does a great young Aussie actor called Sam Delich, who's on his way to big things. I think he has some very funny moments in this. It's called Christmas Bloody Christmas, just in time for Christmas.
Okay. Also, something worth noting is Connect, which is a new Disney Plus series. What's notable about that one? It's a bit of a body horror thing about a guy whose eyes are stolen and replaced with a serial killer, and so you can start seeing the murders that the serial killer's involved in. But notably directed by Takashi Miike. So it's a South Korean series with Takashi Miike directing.
That is very cool. Let's delve into history with Dan Barrett. December 10, 1971. Which film and television production company destined to influence the industry forever is founded in San Francisco, California?
I'm not too sure. Are they only known as being a film and TV production house?
Well, they've morphed into an enormous industry force now. Back in the day, off the success of American Graffiti, the young director was able to make his own production company.
Okay, so we're talking about Zoetrope here?
No, we're talking about Lucasfilm.
Never heard of
it. December 10, 1993, which pioneering first-person shooter video game is uploaded onto the internet by ID Software? Is that what it's called, or id Software?
I'm presuming it's Doom.
It is Doom. Well done, sir. December 15, 1997, which musical comedy movie directed by Bob Spears and featuring Meatloaf and Dame Edna Everage premieres in the UK?
I mean, there's really only one answer for this, and I say Spice Up Your Life with Spice World.
It is the Spice Girls movie. Well done. And finally, this is an easy one. Walk up start for this. December 16, 1913, Charlie Chaplin begins his film career at Keystone Studios, earning how much US dollars a week?
Good question. I'm going to say 20.
150.
150. See, I was trying to do the adjusted for inflation, but in reverse.
Okay, well, then I'll give it to you. I'll call that one for you on you. Birthday sting.
I didn't. 1 second.
No, not happy birthday. No, not that. Please, no, not happy birthday.
Now, I'm the first to admit that this week's birthday buddies is a kind of impossible task, but I'll run through them and see if you can put it together. December 10. No, you haven't. December 10, 1960, Kenneth Branagh. December 13, 1948, the beautiful Dee Wallace. December 15, 1949, Don Johnson. And December 15, 1963, Becky Gelke herself, Helen Slater. All had their birthdays in the week ahead. What do they have in common? You won't get this. I was in a bad mood.
I know you're expecting me to just go the joke saying that they all played Supergirl at one point, but no, that would be ridiculous. I believe that each of these actors all performed opposite Michael J. Fox in a romantic comedy.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the right answer then. No, that's not the correct answer. The correct answer is they all performed opposite a dog. They've all been in dog movies. Kenneth Branagh made a film called How to Kill Your Neighbor's Dog in 2001 with Robin Wright Penn. Dee Wallace, of course, starring Cujo. Don Johnson began his career in the weird sci-fi film A Boy and His Dog in 1975. And Becky Gelke, Helen Slater, has the, I was going to say the title role, the lead role in Lassie from 1994. There you go. That was a tough one. That was a hard one. Okay, I'll grant people that was a hard one. Nobody's answered that on our Facebook page where you can see the image every week. So maybe I'll ease things off next week.
Look, I mean, often I accuse you of being a little bit light on with some of the connections. It's like, oh, they're all mammals. But You know what? This is legitimately, I think he sort of stepped up. And Becky Gelke is, of course, her character from Seinfeld.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Favorite Helen Slater role? Go.
Ooh. Well, I grew up watching Supergirl, so I'd have to say Supergirl. I haven't seen a whole lot of her work since, to be honest. But yes, maybe Becky Gelke, where she's got the sneeze and you are so good looking.
I always liked her in Secret of My Success, the Michael
Of
J.
course,
Fox
yeah, she was
rom-com
lovely.
she was in. I think she's fantastic in that. Also, I quite liked her in City Slickers.
Oh God, I don't even remember that. But yes, no,
Well, she was the woman that was on the ride with them all.
Oh, of course, yes. Geez, it's been a while since I've seen that. Is that worth revisiting? Does that have the same enduring quality as a Three Amigos or other comedies from the period?
Sorry, why would you think I would have watched that, like rewatched it since 1991? Like, why?
Well, you're all over Helen Slater as a support character.
I actually did. I rewatched it about 3 or 4 months ago. You know what? It's not too bad.
Yeah.
Because I saw it as an 11-year-old, and watching it as someone who's now the same age roughly as the men who are finding that they've lost something in their lives they're trying to recapture, maybe resonated a little bit more with me now than it did as an 11-year-old.
Nice.
I think it's genuinely a good movie.
Yes.
Like, not great by any means, but, certainly good.
Bit of a bolter for the Academy Award. Old what's his name? Jack Palance for the one-arm push-up. That was pretty cool at the ceremony. Anyway, we digress. Have you still got power there?
Simon, it's time to sign off. I think I've got like about a minute left. My name's Dan Barrett. You can find me on Twitter at the Dan Barrett. You should start your day with my free newsletter. It's called Always Be Watching. You can find that one at alwaysbewatching.com. It's got the big stories in TV, streaming, and film. And on Friday, you've got the Always Be Streaming newsletter, which accounts the big shows that launch that very week. And you can find me in other publications like The Guardian and news.com.au.
Yes, you have quite the media profile at present. I'm very interested in what you read and write. I'm not really. I am on Twitter at Simon R. Foster 1. You can read my words over at screen-space.net. Got to get something new up there. Haven't done much writing lately. Visit the Screen Watching Facebook page at Screen Watching Podcast, the Screen Watching YouTube channel, where there's a whole bunch of new interviews this week. I spoke to Matthew Bauer, the director of The Other Fellow, which is the Bond documentary about people all over the world with the name James Bond. It's on SBS On Demand. And I spoke to the other guy, Tristan Barr, who's got a film out called Subject. And you can also catch us on Twitter at screen_watching.
Now, a quick bit of business. There is, as we speak, 5 days until the release of Avatar: The Way of Water.
Baby.
Hey, Simon, question. What do you reckon we're going to talk about on next week's show?
Well, next week's show is a very exciting show because not only do we have Avatar in the works, but it is our 100th episode of Screen Watching, and we will be celebrating with cake and dancing girls and all sorts of things going on. So I can't wait to talk about Avatar. You've got your ticket for opening night, haven't you?
Yes, I'll be watching it the Wednesday night. So there actually was a media screening announced for Queensland at 10 a.m. that same morning.
Oh,
very frustrating. The other thing that's frustrating is that there have been screenings for the film, to some select critics around the place. Yeah. But also, I know there's been screenings in Queensland. Like, I know people that have seen the movie.
This is crazy.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
I might just BitTorrent it. That's actually the first time I've ever heard those words out of my mouth.
So you're going to just say, no, I'm not going to see the most visually lush movie we're going to see in the next 12 months. And
I'll deal with the occasionally pixelated version I can get on my laptop. No, we've got a screening on Tuesday night down here, but I was well down the invite list, and they've put me in Cinema 8 at Hoyt's EQ out at Fox, which I think is the shitty little cinema that they put me in for Force Awakens all those years ago, and I got very cranky about it. So I'm thinking I might hold off to Wednesday night as well.
Yeah, I'd do that. You don't want to see the movie on a small screen. If you go and watch Avatar for all 3 hours of it, go and see it on the biggest screen you can with the best sound.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's why I got all shitty about when Force Awakens. First Star Wars film in 10 years, and it was on one of the mini screens at Fox EQ. But all right, I'll see what I can.
What's even the point?
What's even the point? Avatar next week and 100 episodes of Screen Watching.
Indeed. And folks, people should look out for news.com.au during the week where you're going to find, it isn't published yet, but it will be, I think, right before Avatar comes out. So presumably on Tuesday or Wednesday, little piece telling the haters to go and shove it in their pipe and, maybe just embrace Avatar: The Way of Water.
Happy Avatar week, Dan. Enjoy your viewing. I can't wait to talk to you next week.
See you, Simon.